Hello, everybody. Great to have you along. We welcome you all to Leadership America, where we create champions of change through a culture of civility, through courage, commitment, character, compassion, and not confrontation, but instead positive, productive, respectful conversation. My name is Scott Murray.
And I'm Angel Carlton. We're glad to have you with us today. As you well know, we are in a time where the world is in desperate need of leaders for life. And we're here to bring you some insights, some tools and resources so you can step into that leadership role and share ways to help others do the same. Let's face it, change is happening all around us at a very rapid pace. We're here to help you navigate that change in your life so you can not only survive, but thrive into that greatest version of yourself.
And as you well know, Angel, and everybody watching, 2020 took on a brand new meaning. It used to mean perfect vision, but instead, the 2020 we all endured was anything but. It was a year of so many unknowns. We couldn't even see what awaited at the next corner, or let alone what was around the next curve. Our lives worldwide changed forever. Loss of jobs, loss of marriages, loss of life.
And that is why it is so important for us all to start talking about change. Champions won't be created unless we do have those conversations. Much like the conversations we have on our Leadership America podcast. We get to talk with high-profile leaders each week, and my gosh, you know a thing or two about champions and how they're created, having spent 3 decades as a sports anchor on television in both Washington, D.C. and Dallas-Fort Worth. And then you wrote a couple of published books about your experiences with these champions as you got to see firsthand who were the real champions and who were those that just talked a good game. So we'll be sharing some of those great stories of iconic individuals and their legendary life lessons. That's why we're here today. So we might co-create champions of change together because we can, because I can, and because all of you can.
Indeed they will, Angel, because they can. Because we can, because we all can, because I can. Yes, indeed. Because I can really says nothing is impossible. Give it a shot. I mean, it simply goes, because I can. Much like all the uncertainty that has surrounded us for months with the COVID-19 pandemic, we often don't have answers today, in the present, but we will someday. Have patience, work focused, and just stay so committed to finding those solutions. They're out there, I assure you. So it's up to each and every one of us to help find those correct solutions. Let me show you what I'm talking about. What I mean, all I want you to do is pick a number between 1 and 10, okay? That's going to be your original number. Now I want you to double that number and then add 8 to it, then divide by 2, and then subtract the original number from the one that's now in your head. We picked a number, our original number, we doubled it. Then we added 8 to it, divided by 2, and subtracted the original number from the one that's now in our head. How many people have 4 left? How many people don't have 4 left? I'll see you in math class on Monday. I mean, that's what happens.
And the virtual audience,
Right.
they're glad it's virtual if they're not raising their hand. Look, I don't know how that works, but it speaks volumes that there are solutions out there and answers throughout our world if we simply stay committed to finding them, because we can. And like Scott, I have written a couple of books. My books are on the topic of change and transformation. Through no choice of my own, I've become somewhat of an expert on the topic of change.
So she says.
Right. Well, think about it. So many of us are struggling through all the unexpected circumstances that have taken place in the last year. Therefore, we are bringing you a process that I refer to in my books as the 6 stages of transformation. It's a supportive assistance, if you will, to help you confront challenges and navigate that change so you need not fail, but instead prevail. And how important is it to help our youth do the same. The 6 stages of transformation is the ultimate tool in your toolbox, and we're confident it will allow you the ability to assemble and construct the champion within yourself you'll be proud to have created.
As we transition from the anchor desk to our conversational corner, delighted to be able to share with you all the word change and how it has affected us all, and yet more importantly, how we move forward. Dedicated to Destiny, one of the books that you've written, and you talk about the 6 stages of transformation, I think is just so focused on what we're dealing with now. And you wrote the book long before this pandemic hit us the first part of 2020. Good for you.
I had no idea that the book I wrote years ago would really be for this time right now.
Well, it fits right now, that's for sure.
Yes, and I find myself revisiting the concepts in the book to help me navigate through these times.
Well, tell us how the whole thing works.
Well, with change doubling, this was a study that was done prior to the pandemic. Change is doubling every year and not slowing down. Now, since the pandemic, change has accelerated even faster. So it would benefit us all if we started to understand what change is. And the more we understand change and learn how it shows up in our lives, the better we can anticipate it and move through it with ease and grace. And so what I call the 4 E's in my book, the way change shows up is through events, an encounter, epiphanies, and when it's essential. An event, Scott. I mean, this pandemic is a perfect example of an event occurring in our lives and us just being, the rug being pulled out from under us. And when this unexpected change occurs, transformation is in motion. Any kind of event. You can think of any life event that you've had. Could be a wedding, could be a birth of a child. Those things put transformation into motion. The second E is an encounter. It's through meeting somebody. Mm-hmm. My life changed when I met you. Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad to hear you finally admit it.
But you meet people. It could be somebody who refers you to a job. That career path takes you on another path. You could meet the love of your life. That could change your life drastically. It's an encounter with another person, a relationship that could completely shift things in your life. And the third way change shows up is through what we call epiphanies. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had an epiphany?
Oh, many times.
Yes.
Many times.
They're powerful, those aha moments.
But you know what? The funny part about it, or the sad part about it, most of those are positives. In this epiphany that we've endured and what we've gone through, this event is nothing we want to have an instant replay of. It's just
yes.
the pandemic has just been like nothing we've ever been a part of.
You're so right. You're so right. An epiphany is a shift in our beliefs. It's an instantaneous shift in what we believe. And it almost comes out of nowhere. It's this aha moment. And I believe it's our spirit kind of communicating with us and trying to get our attention. And when we have these epiphanies, it's hard to look at life the same way. And you're right, this pandemic has really caused us to have some epiphanies and aha moments on looking at our lives, our life-work balance and family appreciation, all these things that maybe we took for granted beforehand. And so that's the third way that change occurs. And the final way change occurs is when it's essential. It's either for our own health and well-being, be it physical, emotional, mental health, spiritual well-being. When we know we have to make a change and we intentionally put that change into motion, that's when it's essential. And that's why we're here today, to create champions of change.
Well, share with us our 6 stages of transformation. And you talk about all that takes place here. What is number 1?
The first stage of transformation is realize. This is when we are in shock, essentially, and truth is absurd when first heard. So when you have that in mind, the realize stage is here to just kind of wake you up and forces you to look at what is happening. Create a really keen self-awareness. Use the power of our imagination to visualize the greatest outcome. Might be hard to do at this stage, but the more you can visualize yourself coming out of it in a healthy, positive way and moving into that highest vision you have of yourself, that will help you get through it with ease.
You know, I always wondered when I first saw your book and saw the first stage, the realize, I thought to myself, but what if there's the denial? You don't want to believe this. Oh no, that's not me, or it's always somebody else. And you say, wait a minute. Sometimes there's a pushback from the realization that you should be a part of. Yeah,
that's a great question, because denial typically accompanies unexpected change. You don't, if you have the news of a passing of a loved one, that is the first response. It takes courage to go through change with the intention of coming out of it okay. Because if you don't have that vision, it makes it really hard. And you can see a lot of people struggling today with the statistics of anxiety, depression, suicides. So navigating change is not an option anymore. It is a necessity. And so I know we talk about all these incredible sports icons and legendary athletes that you've encountered as a sports anchor. We talk about somebody who has undergone transformation in their life, who've realized, hey, I got to change something, or put change into motion, who's had the courage to change. Who comes to mind, Scott?
Well, it all fits in exactly what you've just shared, creating champions of change through a culture of civility and doing it in a positive, productive way. And when you talk about change and you talk about something and having the courage to move forward despite some of the things you might have gone through, one of the people that comes to mind is Troy Aikman. We all know Troy. You know Troy well. You watched him many years as the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, and now he's the #1 analyst on Fox. I remember meeting Troy January 2nd, 1988. It was the day after New Year's, but the Cotton Bowl happened to be a day later than normal, and he was the quarterback, All-American quarterback of the UCLA Bruins, and they were in Dallas to take on the Razorbacks of Arkansas. And so went down to the game, watched it. Troy wins the game. He's the MVP of the game, and I go, wow. Well, all the talk at that time was the Dallas Cowboys were about to be sold. And they were about to be sold to a gentleman by the name of Jerry Jones. But at the time, nobody knew that. But when that finally came to pass, there was talk that the #1 draft pick in the entire NFL draft was going to be Troy Aikman. The Cowboys had that #1 pick because they were coming off an incredible season. They were 3-13. So they were dead last in the NFL. So they got the first pick. Who did they pick? Troy Aikman. But they had a new head coach now. The legendary Tom Landry, after 29 years, was no longer the coach. Jerry Jones has brought in his former roommate, his former teammate at Arkansas when they won the national championship in 1964, Jimmy Johnson, who just a couple of years prior, in the late 80s, had won a national championship as the head coach at the University of Miami. And he certainly knew who Troy Aikman was. He'd already gotten Michael Irvin, had been picked up by the Cowboys the year before, and Irvin had played for Jimmy. So, I mean, there's a synergy there, but relationships. And that's the key to this entire scenario here, is relationships, and who you trust, and who you're transparent with, and who you can be accountable to. So the Cowboys go off to training camp. What happens? Cowboys suddenly in the supplemental draft, which is 2 months after the regular draft, there's this fellow named Steve Walsh. You go, Steve Walsh? Oh, wait a minute. He was the quarterback that was at Miami when Jimmy Johnson won the national championship. There's the relationship right there. They trusted each other. Jimmy could count on Steve. Steve knew his coach was Jimmy. So in the supplemental draft, even though they've got the #1 pick in the draft, Troy Aikman, he goes after Steve Walsh.
Ooh.
Yeah, was right. You're absolutely right, Angel. What's this?
Yeah.
Well,
as a fan, you're wondering,
we're in Thousand Oaks, California at training camp, and who gets a lot of the reps, the repetitions to get the practice? Steve Walsh, not Troy Aikman. Season starts, Jimmy's guy is Steve Walsh, and the media just had a field day with this, thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to Troy? Well, the only year, or the only game that they won that year, was on a Sunday night in Washington, D.C. at RFK Stadium. The Cowboys lost or defeated their arch rival, the Washington team. Used to be called the Redskins,
yes.
now the Washington football
yes.
team. And what happens? The quarterback is Steve Walsh. And then at the end of the season, Cowboys finished 1-15, and Troy, it was kind of tough. And I asked him once, a little later on after that, a few seasons later, what was the toughest part about that? He said, Scott, it made me think of when I was in 8th grade, and I moved to Henrietta, Oklahoma from California, where I'd been born. And he said, I needed to do something different that would set me apart from all my teammates so they could get to know me and trust me and realize that I could be a good quarterback. Well, at the time, much like Roger Staubach, he didn't want to be a football player. He wanted to be a baseball player. But when he got to college, he started playing football. It went well. And so now here he is, 1 year under his belt at the NFL, and he didn't play much. He'd been injured a little, but it was tough. So he said, I just remembered what my dad taught me when I was in 8th grade. He told me, hey, you got to set yourself apart. Go in and talk to the coach. So he said, I went in to talk to the coach in a kinder, gentler time when coaches would give the keys to the school or whatever. And he said, everything's fine. He asked the coach if he could hang around after a Friday night football game and not go out partying with all his friends, instead go to the weight room in the school. And he did that his freshman, his sophomore, his junior, his senior year in school until he could take a football and he could pick it up and throw it like on a rope. It was unbelievable. And that was Troy Aikman. Well, he said, I got to do the same thing here. So in 1990, the Cowboys go back to training camp, and Troy's a different guy. He's committed to doing it, and the relationship between Troy and Jimmy began to be this. And Steve Walsh was a good quarterback, but he wasn't Troy Aikman. And next thing you know, that season of 1-15 goes to 3-13, and then 7-9. Next thing you know, the Cowboys are 13-3. It's 1992, and the Cowboys are off to the Super Bowl. And they win Super Bowl 27, Super Bowl 28, missed out on 29, and come back and win Super Bowl 30. And who's the quarterback? Troy Aikman. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, before Tom Brady ever thought of doing that. So it was very special, but that was Troy Aikman. And now he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, broadcaster on Fox, does a lot of things for charity, and is one of those people that was committed, but most importantly, had the courage to set himself apart from whatever it took to get the job done. And that's Troy Aikman. He did it. He did it well.
And courage is a component of a champion.
Absolutely.
Because that's what our presentation is about, is creating leaders for life, creating champions in life. And what a great, great story of courage and somebody who realized change is happening. How do I adapt?
That's the thing.
Adapt quickly.
Absolutely right, Angel.
And that brings us to the second stage of transformation. The first one is realize, right? Realize change is happening. And like Troy, he realized he had to do something different if he was going to
Absolutely.
make it. And understanding that change is the natural cycle of life that is ever changing. And with that cycle, another natural part of the cycle is releasing. There is always something that we need to let go of, or in the case of the pandemic, an unexpected event, things are released for us without our permission. What comes to mind in your experience of some of the things that have been released from your life?
Well, Angel, all the things that you take for granted. Just driving down the road without having to put a mask on your face, or just doing the things you'd like to do. Going to a restaurant and sitting down next to a table instead of being 6 feet away from somebody as we social distance, or whatever it might be.
But you're right. Our freedom has been tampered with. Children and their ability to go out and play with their friends or us to socialize. We're not able to socialize like we were, which is causing a lack of stimulation.
Just things that we take automatically. And I think of children. Just to play with their friends. They can't do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I
want to go play with my friends. I'm not able to do that like I once did, and do the things that I love to do, and just go out and go shopping, and it being an enjoyable experience. But you think about some of the things that need to be released in this second stage of transformation. We talk about our beliefs. Some of our beliefs are being challenged right now. Look at our behaviors. What behaviors are not serving you in this next new normal? when you envision in the first stage that highest possible vision you have of yourself, what are some of the behaviors that are not in alignment with that vision? Those are the things we can't take with us. It's being committed. It's being committed to make the change, committing to yourself to become a better person and really move through change rather than let change ruin your life.
Yeah,
because so many people
not
can.
only ruin your life, but rule your life.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's what I say.
Absolutely.
And so commitment is key. Commitment is another component of a champion. And so when we talk about making a commitment to change and become better and move into that highest vision we have of ourselves, who comes to mind of all the great people you've met?
You know, the real champions were always committed.
Yeah.
They were courageous. They had the courage that we talked about with Troy Aikman, but they were also committed not only to their teammates, but to themselves. And vice versa, not only to themselves, but to their teammates. And a lot of times you didn't see that. It was all about me, 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 me. Those were the ball players that never really became the champions that they should have been. And one guy that certainly comes, that was never about me, 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 it was all about team, 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 was Nolan Ryan. Came to the Texas Rangers in the latter portion of his career, and I remember being at the ballpark, 1991. It was crazy. It was the old Arlington Stadium. It was before the ballpark or any of the fields that we've seen since then. And here he was at Arlington Stadium, 44 years old, and he pitches his 7th and final no-hitter. Fast forward, 9th inning, he gets the no-hitter. Everybody's ecstatic, 44 years old. Well, we're down on the field, we'll do our interviews and everything. The end of the game looks great. Well then, by that time, all the lights are beginning to come down and people have left. It's 2 hours later. And Kerry Smith, my photographer, and I, we walk in through the clubhouse to get to our cars just to go home. After the 10 o'clock news, we've done a live shot and everything. And all of a sudden, it's you know, you don't hear anybody, but I heard somebody in the back, like in the workout room, where the bicycles are, the stationary bicycles. And I said, Kerry, you hear somebody? He said, oh, it's probably Joe doing the equipment, you know, washing all the uniforms for tomorrow. I said, no, it's way in the back. Somebody's in the workout room. We go back there. Here's Nolan on a stationary bicycle in a pair of shorts and a Texas Rangers t-shirt.
After the game?
After the game, like 2.5 hours after. Oh, unbelievable. And so I looked back there, Angel, and I said, Nolan, what are you doing here? He said, hey, Scott, how are you? I said, congratulations, number 7, that's phenomenal. He said, gee, thanks. He was always so laid back about it. And I said, what are you still doing here, though? You ought to be home with Ruth and the kids. And he's pumping away like he's, you know, going from here to, you know, wherever. And I said, Nolan, he said, oh, I can't, Scott. I said, why not? He said, I pitch in another 4 days. He said, I can't let my teammates down. I got to be ready. That was Nolan Ryan. I got to be ready. He can't let his teammates down. It wasn't about him. It was about his team. And he had an obligation. He had a responsibility. That was commitment. That was Nolan Ryan. And that's why he was the champion that he was. That brings us to the 3rd stage of transformation. And it reminds me of what Nolan Ryan knew, what was so important. And that was self-care. The 3rd stage of transformation is rebound. When you think of basketball, right, you think of the opposing team taking a shot, missing, it hits the backboard, you jump up, or Michael Jordan jumps up, right, gets the ball and takes it to the other end of the court to score. Well, that's what the rebound stage is all about. It's taking your life back from this disruption that change has caused. And you have to realize that if we don't rebound in a healthy way, we could spiral down really quickly. And so taking that self-care and knowing how to transition through the stresses, the stressor that change has caused is key. It's not easy for adults, let alone children. And that's why this
framework and understanding the cycle of change so you can help your loved ones and those around you get through it as well, and your coworkers and what have you. But when you think about the rebound stage, you really have to look in the mirror and say, wow, what is my level of stress right now? So if you had a continuum, one end of the spectrum, saying from 1 to 10, 1 being low stress, completely under control, and then 10 being extreme stress, no control whatsoever, on the verge of losing it. Where are you on that spectrum? And once you place yourself on that spectrum, you have to ask yourself, now what? How do I get to this lower end of stress where I feel like I have some control? Mm-hmm. You look at 3 things: the people in your life, the people you can turn to, the places that you can go, and the practices that you can put into motion to help you move through that. Is there anything that you do to get through change? I know I love yoga, meditation, dancing. These are the things that I practice when I'm stressed out. I'll put on some music, mm-hmm. and that really helps
you
me.
Remember, people, places, practices. I've got another word that starts with the letter P. Staying positive so I can be productive. And one of the things that I was taught a long time ago is adversity breeds opportunity. So if you can take the negatives that are all before you and you think, how do I overcome this? What do I do? People, certainly the right person that you can reach out to, that you can count on, that is very important. But it's just understanding that I remember where so-and-so was. I remember what happened to so-and-so. Oh my gosh, I don't want to go there. I'm going to stay positive. As bad as it is, it can always be worse. Always be worse. And I'm going to make it as positive and productive as I can. But I'm serious. Adversity does breed opportunity.
Yes.
It really does.
Staying positive is key, especially when there's, it's hard to
not easy. Not easy,
especially if stuff has been released mm-hmm. from our life mm-hmm. without our permission. Mm-hmm. There's always a grieving that occurs when change happens unexpectedly. That's something to understand. You're going through a grieving process during this rebound stage, mm-hmm. and just understanding that I'm grieving. This is what grieving feels like. It's part of the process
Absolutely.
of change. It's normal.
And then you get to the final word of all those letters that start with P, all those words,
yes,
is know that you have a purpose.
Yes.
And live out that purpose and get to that purpose. And it's going to take some time, staying positive and productive, but that's where I need to be. That's who I am. That's what I'm all about. That's where I'm going to be a difference maker in other people's lives, but in my own life mm-hmm. too.
Oh gosh, having that vision in that realized stage
of
a greater purpose, a greater sense of purpose, that for sure is really super important. And the rebound stage is all about you taking your life back, getting back to a more positive, productive person, and realigning with that highest vision that you have of yourself. Some self-forgiveness for the past mistakes, letting the past go. All of these things are taking place during this rebound stage. You're healing a lot of emotional wounds caused by change, and you're very intentional about it. Once you get through this rebound stage and you start to feel like yourself again, it's like, okay, things are starting to balance out a little bit, but you're really living life with that high level of integrity and character. And I know you have met some incredible people in your life from all spectrums of life. Mm-hmm. Who would you say would come to mind as one of the most highest integrity, highest character person?
There's lots of them out there, but one just stands out above the rest. He was trusting, he was truthful, he was transparent. It's easy to talk about somebody that has great character, but if you had to pick one person, I think of the fellow that said, your reputation is what people think you are. Character is what you really are. And that spells to who you are and what you are all about day in and day out, 24 hours a day. John Wooden, most successful coach literally in the history of collegiate sports and probably any sport. Imagine winning 10 NCAA titles in 12 years, 7 in a row. Coach K, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time at Duke, has won 5. Bobby Knight won 3. And yet he won 7 in a row, 10 in 12 years. And yet I think of Coach Wooden and the first time I met him, and he was just so humble, so kind, so respectful, just so committed to being the very best that he could be. But character was key. That spoke to who he was and what he was all about. Graduated from Purdue University in 1931. No NBA at that time, so he couldn't go off and play ball, even though he was the college basketball player of the year in the collegiate ranks. And how ironic, since then, the collegiate player of the year named the John Wooden Award.
Oh,
that's
cool.
the recipient, whoever gets, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
But so what's he do? He goes off and coaches. Goes just down the street from the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. Goes to a high school. And all the parents are, oh, hey, we got a new basketball coach for the kids. That's great. The boys are going to be excited. But they came home and they were doing homework and they were studying and then they were playing ball. And everything was about education and staying committed and focused on what you should be doing in your world when you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, not playing basketball. So the parents wanted to meet this guy.
Oh, I would too.
Well, you're darn right. They were enamored with his commitment.
My son decided to, study.
End of conversation. You got it.
sports.
Well, that's exactly what it was, Angel. And who was this guy? This doesn't happen. Well, the parents just loved him, loved the commitment that he made. But just the character that he shared as a human being with their boys was very special. Got some national attention. Next thing you know, he's in the collegiate ranks, off to a junior college, and from there went to Indiana State Teachers College, which eventually became Indiana State University, where Larry Bird went to school. Played against Magic Johnson back in the late 70s in one of the greatest NCAA final games of all time. And yet, here is this guy that is just so committed. Well, next thing you know, Indiana State is suddenly, believe it or not, what are they doing? They're in the tournament. There's no NCAA Final Four at that time, but there still was a tournament, and they were asked to be a part of it. Got a call. Hello, this is Mr. Wooden. Can I help you? Oh, yes, we'd love to be a part of that. Now, what's that? Yes, we do have a black player on the team. Yes, a Negro. Yes, he's a wonderful young man. Can't have African Americans. So he said, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to play. And hung up, went and told the players. They all said, way to go, coach, we're with you. The next year, gets another call. They were successful again. So he expects to say, no thanks, move on. They changed the rule, and they called it the John Wooden rule. How about that? Blacks could now be involved in the tournaments. They finished runner-up to Louisville in the championship game. That was John Wooden. So as a result of that, now everybody wants John Wooden as their head coach. University of Minnesota comes calling, UCLA calls calling. This is in the late 40s. Where's he going to go? Well, he'd like to stay in the Midwest. That's where he's from. Tells Minnesota, I'd really like your job. Thank you for the offer. This is great. They said, we'd like to make it official. We're going off on a road trip right now. This was a Monday afternoon. We'll be back Thursday at noon. We'll give you a call. Great. Thanks very much. Now picture a coach doing this today, Angel. Folks, how about this? What does he do? He doesn't keep it to himself. He calls UCLA, who's his second choice, and said, I just wanted to be up front and let you know that I've been offered a job that I think I'm going to be getting from the University of Minnesota. They're going to call me Thursday. But if they decide not to go in this direction, I would love to accept your job if you don't mind playing second fiddle. They said, we appreciate your honesty. Thank you, Mr. Wooden. If it doesn't work out, we'd love to talk to you. Thursday rolls around, 12 noon, no phone call. 1 o'clock, no phone call. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3:15, the phone rings. He picks it up, expecting to be University of Minnesota, a little late, but it's UCLA. Mr. Wooden, have you heard from Minnesota? No, I'm very surprised, but I haven't. He said, well, if you'd like, we'd like to offer you our job if you'd like to make the commitment. He said, I will. That would be awesome. So he takes the job at UCLA. He's most excited. They say, we'll call you and your family out next week. We'll have a press conference. Great. Thanks so much. 4 o'clock rolls around, 5 o'clock, 6:30, the phone rings. He picks it up. University of Minnesota. They got stuck in a snowstorm. This is back in the late 40s, no cellular phones and what have you. So they said, we're so sorry we couldn't get to you, but we'd like to offer you our head coaching job. He said, well, when I didn't hear from you, I assumed that wasn't going to happen, and I accepted a job at UCLA. They said, oh, Mr. Wooden, whatever they offered you, we'll double it. Don't worry about it. And, of course, you're going to need a car to come to campus, so we'll get you a car. And your wife, she loves to shop. We'll get her a car, too. And you're going to need a house. You need to stay someplace. Well, we'll take care of that, too. And he said, that's all very nice, but I don't think you heard me. I already accepted the job at UCLA. I gave them my word. That was John Wooden.
Ooh.
Talk about a man committed to character. That was a champion of what character is really all about.
Wow, what a great example.
Yep.
And a perfect segue into the next phase of transformation, which is reinventing. It's reinvent. The fourth stage of transformation is really putting into action and becoming a John Wooden, if you will.
Right,
I mean, really.
right, absolutely.
Becoming, when you have that, you've used your imagination, you've envisioned yourself being the happiest, healthiest, wealthiest person, wealth meaning full of abundance and positivity. Now it's time to put into action. You've done the work. You've realized, you've released the stuff that doesn't serve you anymore. You've rebounded, you've done that internal healing work to get through that change. And now you're feeling stronger and you're starting to come back to life. That's the reinventing stage. It's fun. It's fun. The slate has been wiped clean, and now you get to put into action the behaviors, the beliefs, because the blocks and barriers have been cleared, and start becoming that next highest vision of yourself. Here's the thing about the reinventing stage, however. It's a practice. You've not been this person ever, or possibly you have been this person before, but it's been a while. You're getting back to being somebody you haven't been in a while. So you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make choices and stumble and fall. And at the end of the day, wipe yourself off, get back up, and just say, you know, I don't like the way I handled that situation today. That's not who I choose to be. That's not who I choose to be as I'm reinventing myself. Next time that happens, I'm going to handle it this way. And that's what the reinventing stage is all about. It's choosing differently. It's choosing differently who you're going to be. It's setting those boundaries, setting that line in the sand, and making sure that people are not stepping over that boundaries, but you are not making exceptions and rationalizing to step over those boundaries as well. It's a great time of life when you have the opportunity to reinvent yourself, because that automatically brings you into the fifth stage of transformation, which is resurrect. That is truly when you have practiced reinventing yourself enough where it becomes second nature and you are living that highest vision of who you are.
It's an automatic.
It's automatic. You are an autopilot. You are really becoming a light, and people are looking up to you. You're a role model. You're John Wooden. You're a champion of change. And you're really a difference maker at this point. And that's where that purpose really does kick in. When you're in the resurrect stage of transformation, the whole idea is to stay there as long as possible, because it's a great place. And so you really have to manage your energy, manage your relationships, manage your emotional response to situations. It's a very balanced place to be. And this is really where you become admired. It is about compassion. And out of all the compassionate people and leaders that you've come across, tell us a story about someone who's living that.
It's pretty easy, Angel. When I think of compassion and I think of somebody that's kind, courteous, respectful, I'm thinking about Jesse Owens. remember reading a book about him. My mother told me when I was in 6th grade I had to read a book for summer report, and she was from Alabama, he was from Alabama, he was born there in 1913, and I read this book about Jesse Owens, 4-time Olympic gold medalist. I go, wow, is this guy something? But being an African American back in the turn of the century, back in the early 1900s, was kind of a tough deal, because here he was kind of looked down upon because he was black, and he'd go to school all day and then come home and pick cotton in the fields with his family, go to bed, get up and do the same thing the next day. It was tough. But he had some asthma issues. So his parents were told by the physician that he needed to move on. And so they didn't want to leave Alabama, but his grandmother lived in Ohio. So he went to Ohio when he was 8, 9 years old. Stayed there, did very well in school, and started setting some high school records in track and field. And everybody thought, wow, who is this guy? Well, next thing you know, he goes to Ohio State, not on an athletic scholarship, but on an academic scholarship. He was so focused and just an incredible individual. The Olympics come calling in 1936, and off he goes to West Germany. He's in Berlin, Germany. And of course, in 1936, that's just when Hitler was coming into power. And so it came time to receive his 4 gold medals in track and field, most ever by an American. And what happens? Hitler says he's not going to get them. And so he would not give him his medals because he was a minority. He wasn't Jewish, but he was black, and Hitler didn't like minorities. And so all those years went by, and he never got. Now picture an athlete today, Angel, not getting his Super Bowl ring or his World Series ring or whatever it might be.
That wouldn't happen.
No, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I could only imagine the response to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know the press that they get out of that.
Yes.
Oh,
wow.
ridiculous. But not Jesse Owens. Never said a thing.
You're kidding.
So now let's fast forward to 1951. Still doesn't have the rings. Gets a call from the Harlem Globetrotters. Jesse, how are you? It's the Harlem Globetrotters. We want you to go to Berlin, Germany with us. We're going to be at Berlin Stadium, 80,000 strong, where you were. And 15 years ago. And he said, oh, I'd love to go. So off they go, but they didn't tell anybody. Helicopter lands at center field. Out the trotters get. They go around. Everybody's, cheering them and what have you. And then Konrad Adenauer, the Chancellor of Germany, said, ladies and gentlemen, we have a bit of a surprise for you. 15 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals at this very stadium. Well, guess what? He's come back with the trotters. Please welcome Jesse Owens. They get on their feet for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then they finally stopped, and Konrad Adenauer looked at Jesse Owens and he said, Jesse, 15 years ago you didn't get that medal, any one of the 4, but we here are most honored. He said, didn't give you a hand of congratulations 15 years ago. I extend to you 2 hands of congratulations because you are a true champion. They stood for another 10 minutes. That was Jesse Owens. Well, fast forward, I got to meet him in the late 70s before he passed away in 1980, I think it was. And I was doing an event where I had to MC a college commencement exercise. The keynote speaker was Jesse Owens. I was so excited to learn that. So I got all this video of Jesse Owens on this old films. I could talk about it on my television shows. Back then I was just when I was beginning to be a news anchor, a sports anchor, and it was great. And I went to this event and I met him, and he was so humble and so kind and so nice. And I did an interview with him, and I called my mom and told her, and I said, remember the book I read in 6th grade? And it was just, oh my gosh, it was too much. Well then, about 10 months later, I'm doing another event that I had to MC, and I didn't know who the keynote speaker was. I'm walking across the school parking lot, and all of a sudden I'm probably 50 feet away from a guy, and I hear him go, hey, Scott, how are you? And I look up, and I couldn't see who it was, and as he got closer, it was Jesse Owens. He recognized me. I had to be recognizing him,
your name
and he remembered my
everything.
name.
Wow,
and I just
special.
was blown away. And so he said, how are you? I said, I'm good. Oh my gosh. And I called him Mr. Owens, and he said, oh, please call me Jesse. And I said, well, yes, sir. Oh, this is great to see you again. And he said, we need to keep in touch. And I said, yes, sir. So we did. We kept in touch, and with his wife sent a note to me after I got after Jessie passed away, I sent a note to her, and she sent me a thank you note. Jesse really enjoyed meeting you, you know,
how cool.
late in his life. Oh my gosh, Jesse Owens. But that was Jesse Owens. He was the true champion, but a true champion of certainly courage, commitment, and character, but also one of the most compassionate, kind, loving people you'd ever want to meet. Angel, he was over the top.
Yeah, I could feel the essence of his gentle spirit.
Just hearing the story.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Great story. I love your stories. And
that was special.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's
special. A good one.
Yeah.
Well, this is bringing us to the 6th and final stage of transformation. We've realized the greatest vision of ourselves. We realized change is happening. Mm-hmm. 2nd stage is release. We've let go of all those things that no longer serve us. We've rebounded. We've reinvented ourselves. We've picked ourselves up and risen above the ashes. We've resurrected to living that highest vision of who we are. And what is the point of going through all that if you can't give back to somebody else who needs it? The 6th and final stage of transformation is respond. It's time to be a responder. Today, first responders are our heroes. Those people on the front lines are our heroes. It's time to take on that heroism in life and give back, pay forward, take all that wisdom that you learned along your journey of transformation, share it with others. Take this framework that we're sharing with you on how to get through the cycle of change and share it with others. Create a sense of purpose that Scott spoke of earlier and put it into action. Put a framework together for yourself so you can help other people get through this cycle of change.
Well, what Angel is talking about is a conversation that I had with John Elway, and that opened up the doors for him to have a conversation with a little boy, all of 4 years old. Here's how the story goes. 1985, John Elway's just a couple of years out of Stanford University, #1 draft pick in the NFL in '83, goes to the Denver Broncos, and here he is up in Denver just doing his thing and playing quarterback for the Broncos. Well, I get a call from the girls club in the West Side Dallas area. This is before the boys and girls clubs came together. And they said, Scott, John Elway's coming in. Nestle's sponsoring an event for us. Would you MC? I said, oh, I'd be happy to. I said, can I bring someone with me? And they said, who's that? I said, his name is Tommy Clark. He's 4 years old, and he has what they call Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Now, Duchenne at the time, Angel, was really a death sentence, because back in the early 80s, mid-80s, if you were a boy, you had to be a boy to get Duchenne. You didn't really make it to school age. It was so, you were born all of, he was about 35 pounds at the time, and his arms were no bigger around than my finger. In a wheelchair his entire life, but the nicest little boy you'd ever want to meet. And as the former host for the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, I did that for 27 years, I met people like Tommy Clark and his family. And so I said, for whatever reason, Tommy thinks John Elway is the second coming. And I said, he's got an orange wheelchair and he needs to, and they said,
he painted his wheelchair orange for John Elway.
Yep, for Elway. I said, you're more than welcome to bring him. And I said, okay. Well, we get there. John's there. We go through the whole night. At the end of the night, I say, John, thanks so much for being here. When the Broncos aren't up against the Cowboys, we're going to be pulling for the Broncos. All the best. And he said, thanks very much. And we started off the stage, and he said, Scott, who's the little boy back there in the wheelchair? I said, his name's Tommy Clark. He's got Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he thinks you are the end of the world. He said, you're kidding. I said, yeah. I said, he was born and raised in Dallas, but he likes the Denver Broncos and John Elway. I said, if you got just 1 minute, you can come back and say hello. Well, I thought he'd get down and, and lean over and talk to Tommy for a minute or two. As you well know, he got down on one knee for about 15 minutes and talked to Tommy, and then stood up, reached into his pocket, pulled out a pen, said to Tommy's father and mother who were there, Mr. Clark, can I get a piece of paper and I need your address? Wrote his address down. 5 days later, in the mail from Denver, comes this 3 foot by 4 foot framed.
It's a jersey, right?
It was a jersey, yeah. It said Clark. It said Clark.
How cool is that?
And on the jersey it says, to Tommy Clark, my new best friend, John Elway. Unbelievable. Well, the next year at the telethon, I asked one of the neurologists, I said, Tommy seems to be doing pretty well. He's now 5 years old. This is close to the end, is it not? He said, he has a will to live like nobody you've ever seen. I said, John Elway? He said, well, John Elway and the medicine and the money you all raise for research, it helps. But yes, John Elway is the reason. Wow. I said, that's unbelievable. He said, it's how it works. Next thing you know, he's in 2nd grade. He's in 4th grade. He's in 10th grade. He's graduating from high school. Sends an invitation to Elway to come to his graduation. And they've kept in touch throughout the years. And John sends him a note, said, can't make it, Tommy. This is the time of year I'm off to training camp, taking the family on vacation before we go to training camp in the new season. But he said, I want you to find a prominent place to display this. Waterford crystal replica of the Denver Bronco stallion that to this day sits on the mantle at the Clark household. Unbelievable. Now Tommy, we used to take him to the television station all the time and do different things and what have you. So he wanted to get into sports. So he goes to Texas A&M. One thing I didn't tell you though, his parents, his entire life, have had to get up in the middle of the night 2 or 3 times and turn him, almost like a rotisserie of sorts, so he can breathe and doesn't choke on, you know. And so who's going to do that at Texas A&M? They formed Tommy's team. 12 guys on his floor that take turns for 4 years, getting up in the middle of the night, turning Tommy.
Wow.
Talk about commitment.
No kidding.
Unbelievable. So now Tommy's graduating, sends out applications, internships, New York Yankees, Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, the Dallas Cowboys, the Texas Rangers, Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, you name it. Also sent one to the Colorado Crush. This is like 2008. So we're talking a few years ago, but Tommy's graduated from college, and Elway has gone on, won his Super Bowl championship, is now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and is the owner of the Arena Football League team, the Colorado Crush. So Tommy sends one off to them. His assistant, hey, John, Tommy Clark, is that the boy in Plano, Texas? Or Richardson? It is. He wants a job with us. Get a hold of him. He's our guy. So, but his mother's got to resign or retire from teaching school, as both his parents did in the Richardson School District outside of Dallas. So what do? Mom goes up for 10 months, but they're going to need a place to stay. So Elway buys them a condominium, buys them a car, and he and his mom are there for 10 months. The first day, he's got Tommy at the Colorado Crush's office. This is Tommy Clark. He's my new right-hand man. He's going to learn PR. He's learning IT. He's going to learn sales, media, and he goes all the way around the whole thing. By the end of the season, he's reinvented or redesigned the media guide for the Colorado Crush. Just very good with all the IT stuff. So now it's time for him to come back, and Elway says, can you stay? We'd love to have you stay. And he said, no, I want to go to law school. So he said, well, when you get out of law school, you're going to be our team attorney. So he comes back to Dallas, goes to SMU, gets his law degree, and everybody's most excited. We all call him and congratulate him and what have you. About a month later, I get a call from his dad. Scott, hey, Tom, how are you? Well, I've been better. What's up? We lost Tommy last night. I said, oh, you're kidding. He said, yeah. I said, I'm so sorry, so sorry. He said, yeah, but he had a great life, thanks to people like you. And he said, I would like you to be Olivia and I would like you to do the eulogy. And I said, oh, Tom, no, there's got to be somebody else that, no, you have no idea the difference you made in that boy's life. From John Elway to whatever, please. And I said, okay. I said, have you talked to Elway? I did. And he's going to get back. He couldn't talk. And I said, okay, I'll get something from him. And I said, how about Tommy's team? We've talked to them. They're all going to be at the church. And they were. I read this most incredible letter that you can possibly imagine from John Elway. And then we had the boys stand. The Tommy's team all stood. All 12 of them were there. And then that was very special. That was very special. And then also got a call from Tom again that his mother had passed away of a broken heart. So
yes.
so we were over there for that, and it was incredible, incredible. But that was Tommy Clark and that was John Elway, making a difference in the life of a child. And it simply doesn't get any better than that. And that's what we all try to do in our, or we should. Let's not forget that when we're old and get gray, those kids that we're raising are going to be calling the shots, so we better teach them right, huh? But I think what we might do is maybe close with the poem that we know about the importance of giving back to children and letting them know how wonderful they are. It's not only what we say, but how we say it. So it goes something like this. It says, "I got 2 A's, the small boy cried. His voice was filled with glee. His mother turned and rudely said,
'But why didn't you get 3?
Mom, I've got the dishes done,' the girl called from the door. Her mother turned and rudely said,
'But did you sweep the floor?'
'I mowed the grass,' the tall boy said. 'I put the mower away.' His father turned and rudely said, 'But did you clean off all the clay?' Now the children in the house next door seemed happy and content. The same thing happened over there, but this is how it went. 'I got 2 A's, the small boy cried. His voice was filled with glee. His mother turned and smiled and said,
'I'm glad you live with me.'
'Mom, I've got the dishes done,' the girl called from the door. Her mother turned and smiled and said,
'Each day I love you more.'
'I mowed the grass,' the tall boy said. 'I put the mower away.' His father turned and smiled and said, 'You've made me happy today.' Children desire a little praise for things they're asked to do. If they're to lead a happy life, so much depends on you. Because we can. Yes, we can. We sure can. And you can. So again, make a difference in the life of a child. Because you can, because we can, because I can, because we all can. That's what it's all about. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate your time. And, right?
Yeah,
make it happen.
That's why we're here.
That's right.
Be that difference maker that we know you are, and be a leader for life. As we've been talking about creating champions of change through a culture of civility.
Through courage, commitment, character, compassion, and conversation, not confrontation.
Yes.
Right?
You got it.
Because
we can. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.